तूने खींची कोई तार तू खींच everyone and welcome Nicholas. IBSC that. It's a privilege and honor to have with us IBSC Asia Director, Mr. Nicholas, with us here today. We happen to be here in India, so I thought it's an opportunity for all of us to have him with us for an interactive session with a small group of people, professionals. They have also come up with indication that they will revise the IBS and they have sought observations, comments from people. They have already floated a mail to all the members, not only other members, but the entire IBS universe. All of you are requested to kindly share your comments with us so that we can collate all those comments and pass it over to IBSC for consideration. Of course, there are some new areas which we expect IBSC to take up subsequently going forward, but they have their own views on that. One key area is that ESG. A lot of developments are taking place in environment, societal and governance aspects. So that's one area they should be looking at. And then of course, plantations, we don't have any, even a lighter source is not available with regard to plantations, tea and coffee. And probably also other aspects which as of now we don't have practice for and standards, they should get to be looking at that. In the present Nicholas, I request you kindly make a few remarks and really a formal presentation.
And all of a sudden, it was a very rich, intense discussion that lasted, I don't know, half an hour or so. And really, I was thinking to myself, well, how lucky we are in IDSC to have all of a sudden so engaged, so competent, so professional, and are really interested in furthering the valuation profession. So I'm really blessed to work in an organization that has members such as yourselves, right? And I also have to say that, we set standards, but there's a line beyond which we do not go, because this is in fact, the rules, the implementation has to be left to local jurisdiction, has to be left to the RDOs, has to be left to, the authorities. So we stop at a certain point because we are here to support you and support the I really apologize for this. I don't know spend a few minutes here. To some of you, the structure of the valuation standards may seem a little bit unusual, because essentially what you have here are the common valuation principles, and then you have those asset-specific standards. And so the common valuation principles this basis on which any valuation has and really that is some of you the low valuation standards may also understand. So description of the unusual word is essentially reporting how basis of value, the common valuation over about the basis of value or really how you consider an asset specific standards and so they kind of reflect the valuation what is this evaluation basis for how you're without any valuation. The purpose really valuation. Some of these are very nice these are very may also have work. All of us here are having our basis of valuation. If you go into the suite of your basis of can you understand why this is valuation the same as so people are playing that because they don't understand it easily why valuation basis for effectively they consider the fact that it's the basis based on that. The purpose is actually why some of these are very it's the most something that I always every amount is going to work that all of us here have real and I think the fact that if you go into the suite of your basis can you experience that? No, say that. So, people are particularly because they want to be talking about that before effectively they consider the fact that it's based on that. They are actually applying some of these other countries who have come up in more they're not to be so as I always thought that they're sort of talking about the same work that evaluation they rely on something they rely on that. Can you experience this kind of say that trust about these words they want to be able to evaluation before and all of their traditions we have that prayer is actually why they're trying to get the value which frankly again are often the origin of misunderstandings because people talk about equity, enterprise management interest. These are very, very mechanisms of just levels here about what it is frankly are already the origins of misunderstandings because these all stand about equity, enterprise management interest. Then people have the valuation approach just levels here about choices approach must be already the origins of misunderstandings about equity. Again, and it was that the valuation approach just help clear choices approach must be already free to go into the again, I know that there are many illustrations of valuation approach where to help clear choices approach must be already free to go into the special consideration. Again, I know there are other rights and information where to help collaborate choices approach should assess the information that's been given. given what is happening with other years, are we various structures, priorities, the plays, and other programs, outside of what we need, even certain factors, given what is happening with other years, are we various structures, so game activities, the plays, the stream, and our programs, outside of what we need, And that industry, okay, the topic that we discussed about, I just wanted to point out that, we operate at the salmon side. Now you could imagine various guidelines and more granular interpretation for such and such a industry, but we're very much here in that industry, okay, principle that is discussed. You can see that the principles here, I just wanted to point out the abide, pretty much right, even for you operate there are some at the salmon side, you could imagine like various guidelines and more granular interpretation for such a. I want to point out for leadership, this is a very industry, okay, principle that is important. You see there was a program there, when you point out the abide, it allows us to explore where you operate there are some at the salmon side, but very good salmon one where you are. Like various guidelines, leadership practices, welcome, leadership, this is a very so we will be coming up with a evaluation of technology. Broader theme here that I'm happy to disclose around the uncertainty evaluation. Right? How do you deal with the fact that $100 million so we will be coming up with a evaluation of technology. A broader theme here that I'm happy to disclose around the uncertainty evaluation. Right? How do you deal with the fact that $100 million How do you deal with the fact that speed that you don't need to go coming up with a valuation technology. More of the around the research. How do you deal with the fact that speed coming up with a valuation technology. More of the
That's, I think, not only are Indian address collisions, but this is what I want to say. Scanners are like the key. the implementation, it's cinnamon, pistachio, whatever you want, you can live with that. In fact, we encourage that. We encourage the standards to be adapted to the local jurisdictions, to the local needs. We encourage that. But the baseline, the base is the here. The standards are that base. This is what I think standards enhance the profession, protect the reputation of the profession, and cinnamon, allow pistachio, overall better application. In fact, we encourage the standards to be adapted to the better because of the local needs. We encourage this. But then that's something else that I would remind all of the order here is how the standards are that basis, the valuation profession. Standards enhance something that is protect the reputation of the profession. And the cinnamon, allow pistachio, overall better application. In fact, we encourage the standards to be adapted to the better question because of the local needs. We encourage this. But then that's something else that we still have all of the order here is how the standards are that basis, the valuation profession. Standards enhance something that is protect the reputation of the profession. I have to come back soon to explore. But I have to come back soon, but not only to explore because we still got but I do want to resolve the data. We are at a crucial point, not only because the standards are changing and protect the feedback, but it is pretty clear that I have to come back soon to explore the world economy. I'm living in this area for 14 years. I have to read every week there are 2 family offices and mostly I investigate in the region, and by region we are as FDI waiting for the standards that are changing and they require valuations. They often have here that investors who are in America and Canada, I have to come back soon who have to explore the world and require international valuations and international norms. I have to read every valuation so mostly I investigate in the region whereas the argument is changing and they require valuations role. They often have here that the investors who are in the allocation and I have to come back soon for explorers in the world and require international valuations and international norms. I have to read valuation so mostly I investigate in the region whereas the argument is changing and they require valuations role. They often have here that the investors who are in the allocation and I have to come back soon for explorers in the world and require international valuations and international norms. I have to read valuation so mostly I investigate in the region whereas the argument is changing and they require valuations role. They often have here that the investors who are in the allocation and I have to come back soon for explorers in the world and require international valuations.
Thinking about reconfirmation habits. Just touch upon that and elaborate on that. He gave a nice parable of
They often have here that the investors who are in the
geographical location, cultural civilization, giving different names, but actually the essence of it is thinking about reconfirmation. I guess there would be some change in the recipe also, no matter how the outcome comes about. And in context of valuation, that nice recipe becomes the thing which would distinguish how valuation is conducted, read, interpreted, and giving different names, but and in a way of speaking in various. I guess there would be some beyond the semantics. No matter how the outcome, fair value, market value. And in context of valuation, these are nice recipe becomes and it is the only possible thing which would distinguish how each and every conducted, read, interpreted, and different names. And given that IBSC itself is taken, I guess there would be some beyond the semantics principles of fair value, market principle context value standards rather than a rule-based standards. And it is important that for different jurisdictions, specifically consider where a lot of are given that IBSC itself system justice evolving very I guess there would be some beyond the semantics principles of economic context or the professional context of standards rather than there is a need I believe it's important that for jurisdictions specifically consider guidance notes where which can lot of help given that IBSC practicing professionals as well as the users of the valuation reports give them a framework within which they should be reading the reports, they should be looking at the methods, processes, framework which are adopted by any valuator, and those guidance notes, as the name suggests, would eventually guide a valuer to address some contentious questions rather than landing in a situation where it becomes some sort of my opinion against yours. That would help in removing a lot of litigious arguments that come about whenever a valuation exercise is conducted. A lot of arguments that come out between the clients and the regulators and the valuers themselves. So I think as members of the profession and also the upholders of the regulations as well as people responsible for the development of the profession, the RBO as well as IBBI or the ministry itself, I think it's high time that some sort of conversation starts where specific guidance notes, if not on all the asset classes, some specific asset classes which are of critical importance on which there had been some or conversations have already started, or those asset classes or those specific asset groups where you have had all the asset classes good track record of some experience and multiple views which has come about, to put them together so that the entire journey of conversations and entire journey of evolution of the profession can take a more structured format rather than completely relying on either the regulatory pronouncements which IBPI keeps coming out with, which has come about. I've noticed these days the show cause notices which come about and our IBPI keeps saying, hey, value, you have not done this. Although the law says this, but still you should have done this. So a lot of those things, a lot of questions which the regulator yesterday, one of the former technical members came about, how come the valuations change over a period of time. So as long as there are some sort of a documented guidance notes around, I think it will address a lot of those uncertainties on those questions around, and I think the profession is robust enough with about more than 5,000 practicing professionals around, a lot of them very senior professionals who are in this room, were present in yesterday's conclave also, who can contribute very effectively under the aegis of the regulator as well as the RBOs to put together these guidance notes as a starting document, and then let the industry develop around 5,000. Thank you, sir.
May I request Manish Srivastava sir to please?
Who can contribute very effectively under the aegis of the regulator as well as the RBOs to put together these guidance notes as a starting document, and then let the
Thanks everyone. And so with the discussion that's going on in the year, and so there is a very thin line when we say like the standards of valuation and when we say doing the actual valuation. So the standard obviously is certain frameworks that we need to do these things, the valuation process under these certain guidance notes. the discussion that's. But whenever it comes to the doing the valuation, there being always being certain challenges that come. Maybe the principals give us the insight that okay, this is how we need to go ahead, this is how we need to evaluate it. But at the end of the day, there being certain challenges which you need to address, and those come at certain point of time. Whenever it comes to the doing the valuation, there being always the world is moving very fast, and if you look into the journey, there used to be the time when the consumers where we find the consumers in the year like 1800 or 1900, or if I say in the year 1930s or 1940s, it may be in the radio at certain point of time. जब वो आता था सिबा का गीतमाला, बिना का गीतमाला. So every consumer used to be there. Now the consumers move from there when the consumers to there later on to the TV sets. Like then now the consumers are moving from there from TV sets to the YouTube. The consumers are on the mobile, the YouTube, right? And the radio. So the world is evolving fast. The technology is going very fast. So the standards also need to be revamped according to that, and IBSC is doing a great job, like revamping it, opening it to the public, like what is more needed, what are the things that need special attention, and that is where the IBSC as well as the technology is going very fast. So the standards also need to be revamped. Industry, like we are sitting in industry revolution 4.0. So when I say 4.0, it all started from where? It started from 1.0 when the steam was invented, and we say that there used to be the steam engine, and we can run the things from the steam engine. And then came 2.0, from steam to the electricity, from the 2.0 to 3.0 to the machines, to 4.0 when the machine is now start interacting, and then 5.0, we are at the verge, at the advent of 5.0, where the robots will be doing the things, right? So if you talk about like Tesla, so which is way ahead of what we've been thinking of, right? No driver, nothing. So how the market is evolving, where the consumers are moving, so we need to, the standard also need to evolve itself in a way like how the market dynamics is changing. One thing, like everything is fine, okay, we know the valuation approaches, we know the method, we know everything right, we know all the standards. But one thing that need to be categorically looked at is the data. The data that is coming to us, whether the data is right or not. And the data is coming from whom? Whether the data is coming from the top management, whether the data is approved by the board of directors, or the data is just being provided by any accountant of the company. That is again another important aspect that needed to be taken care of. Because if the data, if the input is wrong, the output whatsoever you apply, whatsoever the brain knowledge you apply, the output is going to be the wrong. Right? So data is the oil which need to be categorically looked at from where it being derived into. Okay. Then as well as like when I talk about IVSC, certain few things that further need to be looked at, like Gupta ji has said, plantation, livestock. Then something can also be talked about on the business model side. Like suppose, like when the e-commerce company came into India, and everybody is talking about GMV, right? Gross marketable value. But gross marketable value is not something which should become the part and parcel of my cash flow, because gross margin is the total overall value. Then later on it being corrected and it being said no, GMV is not the right parameter. So those business sense things also need to be little bit more focused from the IVSC side. Like okay, what are the things parameter on the business model side, on the sectorial sides, under these sectors, what is needed to be done. Okay, so these things can be taken care of, and that can create a more value proposition, and the way we do the business, the way we used to do the things, the entire landscape is changing, right? So accordingly there need to be the evolution is happening, as well as the standard also need to be evolved along with the business dynamics. Okay, thanks a lot, and this is from my side. Okay, thanks.
Thank you, sir. May I request Alok Kaushik sir to please come and to share your views on the international valuation standards.
Thank you. And good evening to all the people present here. Good evening, plus. Good evening, Mr. Gupta. So I'll keep my discussion very brief. Value, as we discussed, so value is very different from price. We all understand. So if there are 10 people valuing an asset, so there will be 10 values. So one major concern, which Nicholas also mentioned, and also what the regulator is facing these days, is that there is a lot of divergence in the values, how to reduce those divergences. So one, I think one tool is the standards. So standards is, by name itself, it says these are standards of working. So there is if there is a standard, so both or everybody who's doing valuation is following the same standards, so similar standards, then the divergence is bound to be in a limited number only. As on date also, the regulator has defined this divergence as 25% acceptability. So we accept 25% divergence in the two values. So that again is a big number. So I think if the valuers who are doing the valuation, if they are doing great amount of research, and also they are reading the standards deeply and presenting their findings in the reports in a very, I would say, methodical manner, then these divergences can be controlled or managed to these levels. The recent orders which have come from the regulator, so those have been a subject of great amount of concern among the valuers. So one subject, I think, is the inventory, which IVS has done very well in recently. They have in the last update which they have done, so they have talked about standards on inventory also. So that's a very big good document, and whoever is dealing in inventory, I myself gone through that documents a few number of times, and I think if we follow that standard diligently, it's easy, and the divergences also can be managed. Another point, I think Dr. Gupta also wrote an article on this. In India, it has become fashionable saying that valuation is an art and it's not science, more of an art. So we try to justify the divergences by saying it's an art, so very subjective. So if 2-3 people are doing it, then the divergences can be 100%, 20%, 10%. So I think following the standards is a good way to push the profession towards a scientific work rather than an artistic work. So it's extremely important. Other things, I think the standards cannot say how to detail our working. So that is to be done by ourselves only. So they can only give steps or guidelines, what is to be done. So all the kind of detailing or research or assumptions that we make, so we have in our reports, we have to explain those assumptions very diligently and in a very detailed manner. If we see the IBBI orders, so they are questioning the process. So nowhere have they questioned the value which has been arrived. So all the orders which have come, they are asking what process you follow. And if you are saying that you have followed a standard, whether you have actually followed the standard, just written in the report that you have followed that standard. So if you are following a standard, that means you are following each and every aspect of that standard. And that's the way IBBI or the regulator or anybody else would expect the divergences to be managed. So I think that's very important, that a valuer's work is a very detailed work. We have to do a lot of research. Every case is a very unique individual case, which we have to treat it like that and do our work diligently. These kind of feedback that we give, and also the proposed updates in the IPSC, So those first-hand experiences which we have, so we give a feedback to IBSC, to the RBOs, who then compiles it. And I think that's the way the standards would evolve over the period of time. India is very new to following standards, though earlier also when we talk about the 34 AB valuations, so we had 35-40,000 valuers which have been told earlier, but now registered valuers are only 5,000 odd numbers. So because the process of making registered valuers is a very rigorous process, so not everybody can become a registered valuer. So we have to appear for exam, there has to be capability for doing that. But earlier also standards were there. So the income tax rules or the customs department, they had their own standards. But IBSC or single standards or the CA standards or whatever standards we have in India, I think they are much more detailed. And IBSC is doing a great work in further detailing these standards, bringing in more subjects of valuation. So best wishes to IBSC for this work and the RBO also. So we have the ICMI RBO, which takes lead in all the valuation standard formulation in India, and also the kind of research papers or the publications that ICMI RBO does. I think that is unparalleled. No other RBO is doing that. So my compliments to RBO for that, and thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. May I request Anil Kumar Sharma, sir, to please share your views on valuation standards.
Thank you, Nicholas, for giving us a very brief overview of the standards. I'd like to take some very few points in terms of, what are the challenges we are facing in terms of, various issues related to valuation, how standards can be sort of, I would say, expanded, to a certain extent to help us here. One of the things that all the valuers are facing as a challenge here is what is the level of investigation at which we should cease our valuation. That is, at what point can we tell the client that look, this valuation is not going to be possible because of the level of investigation that is not possible, right? So the standard IBSC is a very principle-based, approach that you've taken, and can I draw any conclusions from the standards that what is the point at which the valuer can actually be bold and say that look, I cannot proceed any further with this valuation because there isn't enough data for me from the client itself to be able to do the valuation. For instance, just to give you one example, in tangible assets you get sometimes just a list of assets, right? And they'll also send me photographs and they'll say, okay, can you do the valuation of the assets, right? That IBS can offer us to say that, look, the valuer must not proceed with the valuation, particularly if I was to look at IBS 300 for plant and machinery, or let's say for business valuation, what is the point at which I say that, look, it's not possible for me to proceed with this valuation. I mean, I'm not getting the right inputs for me to, the basic scope is not very well, defined for me to carry out the valuation. So that according to me is a single, problem that valuers are not able to step forward and say that I need this, and if it's going to be so limited, then I have to turn this, back to you, right? I cannot take this any further. So that's one. The second thing is that the second issue that I found with, not issue really with I think it's the adoption of the liquidation value in terms of the insolvency code that we have here, right? Now, the way IBS defines it, you have to assume certain premises to be able to arrive at the liquidation value, right? Now, can I have two different liquidation value for a corporate data? Can I have? So that is is there anything in the standard that allows me to give two different liquidation values? which is really the possible, I mean, which is really what you're telling me to do, because if the liquidation value is to be determined on the basis of two different premises, right, then I can arrive at two different liquidation values, right? So can I tell my client that, look, there is this liquidation value, if I assume this premise, but there is this liquidation value that, which I arrive at using another premise, right? And how are the judiciary going to perceive it? So ultimately our liquidation values will go to the judiciary, right? Which is going to figure out whether, this value has done the job well or not, because he's given me a confusing picture of this thing. And maybe the transaction that is being envisaged by the, by the user of the report was not clear to me as a valuer at the time of valuing the asset, right? So on the day of the valuation, I was not clear whether he's going to do a transaction on a piecemeal asset basis or he's going to do a transaction on a whole plant basis at the same place. So I gave him two different liquidation values, right? And the judges are, confused that, look, how am I going to, how is this valuer interpreting it in this way, right? Unless he has a full understanding, unless the report is actually very clear and very lucid, okay, that this is how you need to interpret the report. So is there anything in the standard that tells me that, look, I can really arrive at two different liquidation values, which I think it does, but it doesn't say so specifically, right? The other issue is about, the weightages. You allow weightages, right? You say that, okay, I apply a cost measure, then I apply an income measure, then I apply a market measure, and I can take a judgment call in terms of what the weightages should be in terms of using different approaches, right? Now, how does that practically happen, and how does it how do I interpret the probability that I've arrived at? What is the reasoning that is what is the basic level of reasoning that is necessary for me to be able to take different weightages for different approaches is something which is not very clear to me in the through the standards at least. I mean, it doesn't give me a very good clue as to what I should do. What is the basic thing I need to do in terms of assuming certain weightages? What is that I rely on to be able to say that I take the cost weightage to be cost method weightage to be so and so, and and one last thing that I wanted to talk about is that forced transaction, right, and ordinary transaction, right? So insolvency is by nature, I believe, a forced transaction, because even if I'm doing a CIRP valuation, I'm basically forced by a certain deadline. I mean, the IP is forced to do a transaction by a certain deadline. He's supposed to resolve the corporate data within 180 days or 270 days. So there is that's not a question to you actually, but that's just for my understanding. I want to sort of just, share it with my colleagues that should we start declaring in our reports that this market value or this liquidation value is actually or at least the liquidation value is actually a post transaction and not an ordinary transaction, because there is going to be a deadline. There is going to be a deadline for options. There is going to be so maybe you can help us in clarifying some of these questions. So thank you very much.
All right, so I'm back for more. You broach a lot of issues here, and I'm just going to try to go through them. So, starting with the, I want to dwell on the quality of information now. If you don't get, and I was looking for it, but if you don't get the information that you require from management, you have to say so, and that you can decline the engagement. It's somewhere there. I would have to look, and I don't want to bore everyone, but it is provided somewhere there. If you don't have the adequate information, you cannot do evaluation. And I think that this point is even more reinforced in the current exposure draft.
And more generally, the philosophy here is that you need to be, and that's why I showed that one slide with more disclosure, like, you need to articulate much more clearly what it is you're doing, the purpose of the valuation, the scope of the valuation, the limitations, and so on. So if you don't get the information, in theory, you should walk away. Now, valuation is also a business, and I understand that there are reasons why it's difficult to walk away, but in theory, you should have it. So it is somewhere there.
There's one corollary to this. I mean, is there an engagement format that the standard would advise this, but obviously you say that there should be an engagement, a scope of work, which is
Absolutely.
guidance about the standard related to the scope of work.
This is reinforced in the exposure draft around the purpose. If you don't have a purpose, you cannot
Yes.
do evaluation.
Yes, I agree.
So so it's much more. We have strengthened the language around, what you can and what you should have. You can't just walk into evaluation now, much less than before. Just walk into evaluation. You need to be satisfied that you have this information, that you can answer that, and that's why that slide is so important. The certification that this is in line with IBS is explicit, and that's important because it means that you have satisfied all of this. So we have reinforced, we know about that, and we have reinforced that specifically, that one point. Now, you talk about the premise of value, and I think we spoke about it earlier on. We have the two premises of value: orderly liquidation and forced liquidation. Now, of course, again, these are standards; these are general. You were telling me about the intricacies of bankruptcy law in India, where there are some very stringent, So we could not go down into that. I think we are at the level where it is compatible, but then again, if really the guidelines contradicted our premises, the guidelines would take over, and you could still be compliant with IBS. So, the main point here I want to make is that we can argue about forced sale versus orderly liquidation all you want, but at least it's not highest and best use, which is the default assumption for most valuations, right? So we're not there 100%, but we're there, and there's enough wiggle room to satisfy whatever the requirements of the bankruptcy courts, not only in India but elsewhere.
Is there a possibility of improving the definition of liquidation value to say maybe it does not include the business, for instance, that you are doing a transaction which is without the business of the company, without the business of the plant, or without the business of the organization, right? Whereas the way you define it is actually the sale of collection of assets or a piecemeal of assets, right? When it is liquidated. So you actually, this definition of liquidation value in IBS is going back to the word liquidated, right? My point is, can it be made more clear? For instance, can liquidation value be the value which is value of the assets without the business?
Okay, but then that goes into the scope of what it is that you're valuing. Because you may not be valuing the business. You may be valuing the machinery.
Yes.
And not the business.
Yes. So I'm saying, can we have a more specific definition of the liquidation value, which can be sort of universally applied, and doesn't sort of beat around the bush in terms of going back to the word liquidated?
But if you, sorry, maybe I'm misunderstanding, but if you mandate, if a bankruptcy jurisdiction says, we don't believe in business value, we only believe in machinery value and tangible, there is no business valuation. But what you will find then is that all of a sudden people are paying over the liquidation value of the building because they know there's a business there. So again, a business is not a collection of.
What I'm saying is the company gets liquidated when the company doesn't remain anymore, right? Which takes away the business of the company as well.
But then that is in the scope of, that would be in the specification of the scope of work.
Right.
Because you're going to literally walk away with the truck, the backhoe, and the computers, and you know that is a liquid. That is, as I understand it.
What's the intention of IVS? I mean, do you want to have one liquidation value of an asset, or can there be two liquidation values of an asset?
Well, if you have the same premise, you have 1 point estimate.
If I have two different premises, then
Well, then it's two. Then it's two different
liquidation values.
But they're two valuations.
No, I mean, I can draw the scope which assumes two different premises. Then I can have different liquidation values.
Yeah, because you have two premises. One's for sale
Yes.
that does not give you a proper marketing time.
No, I'm saying let's take a different level of premise. Let's take the whole plant being sold.
Doesn't matter the
asset
asset.
being sold and a single asset being sold, right? Let's take that for instance, right? Can I have these are three different premises, right? Which will lead me up to three different liquidation values.
I don't believe so.
How are the judges going to view this?
Because you have to tell him, and you have to specify in advance what is it that you are.
Moreover, your
Valuing.
premise should also relate with the scope of work.
Yes, but then you have a.
So when you will relate with the scope of work, you will left with the one premise.
Yes, because
So there is nothing in the scope of work standard which says that there can be only one premise.
But you're specifying the asset. Well, I think so. I think that you need to specify the asset and the premise and everything. The premise would be highest and best use most of the time. Now, if this is a departure from, if it's not the highest and best use, then you want to specify, especially if you have 60 days to liquidate a business because the clock is running.
I think you have an answer there. I think highest and best use may be
But that's not liquidation.
That's not difficult.
It's not liquid, but then it's not liquidation. So we go back to the scope and we go back to the disclosure, and you better make, again, you have to make it very clear that this is a highest and best use valuation. If you disclose it, the intelligent reader will know what it is you're talking about. I don't think that perhaps I'm misunderstanding you, and I apologize for that, but I think that if you specify the what it is the asset, the perimeter, again, but that is a requirement of IBS, and you're specifying the basis of value, which may be the liquidation, and then you're specifying the premise of value, and you're specifying the level of value, i.e. the equity. I think you've covered pretty much everything.
What are your views on going concern liquidation?
Well, going.
If I'm asked for liquidation value and the subject is a going concern, and then the liquidation there.
But, yeah, so here we go into the basis. Here we go into the basis of that. If you're asking for the basis of value if you impose a liquidation value onto any asset, then it's specified here in paragraph 80. This is a liquidation basis of value.
What is the reason that American standards they talk about fair market value installed? They talk about liquidation value in place. They talk about liquidation value removed. They have a lot of bases of value. Whereas IBS prescribes only one liquidation value.
Okay.
So
first
what's
of all,
the reason behind it? What is the logic in it?
First of all, we have the IBS defined basis of value, which are found here. But you can have a valuation that is compliant with IBS while using the basis of value from another jurisdiction.
Okay.
So you can be compliant in both. Now, why the Americans have so many bases? That has to do,
I thought that we can have a different base of value if that is in the act in India, if that is in any regulation in India. I cannot pick up a different standard and say I'm compliant with IBS. Then I won't be compliant with IBS.
You can have a different basis of value, yes.
Then I won't be compliant with IBS.
You will. You absolutely will.
Can I make the compliance declaration in that case?
Yes. If you
If I deviate from IBS in terms of basis of value, then how will I give a declaration that I'm IBS compliant?
because you've specified what the basis of value is. If you do a PPA, purchase price allocation, by definition you're doing it under IFRS. The definition is the fair value, right? This is an example, nothing
I
to
would
do.
still be compliant with it.
Yeah, because here we have it here, and we accept non-IVS definitions of basis of value. We mention a few, but we don't. It's not exhaustive. So you can absolutely have the basis of value that you require here on page paragraph 19.
I can, because I agree with you, I can have it provided, but there is my jurisdiction permits me to adopt two different standards. It doesn't permit me, I need to follow only one standard, right? I cannot say that I picked a basis of value from American standard, but I've otherwise complied with IBS. That would be.
No, sir.
Can I do
IBS
that?
has disclaimer that
Paragraph 60.
you can follow the IBS as well as your local bylaws. And
Local bylaws, IBS permits me to do
Local
that. I
standard.
will be compliant with IBS. But if I go to another jurisdiction and pick a basis of value from there, that I won't be compliant.
why will we go out of it? You will comply with the local.
So,
laws
That is because I suppose I want two different liquidation values. I mean, one is I sell a whole plant, another is I sell a piece of equipment, right? Or, I mean, I can have two different. American standard permits that. Liquidation value in place principle.
Scholastically, you may have a point, but here we have to see the acceptability of your report by your end user. Think from that point of view. So your end user want only two values, whatsoever the method you adopt, and the method, as IBC says, IBS says, that these are the standards you did and these are the processes. You follow those processes and arrive at a certain value, which is acceptable by the
So,
your
yeah.
end user. What's my
Yeah. So you have the departure. First of all, we accept the IBS accept different bases of value. So you can absolutely use fair value under IFRS as a basis for an IBS valuation.
Because this one thing I was not aware of, that you can have only a single premise and a single valuation. Is that a valuation? Is that a fact value?
But the premise, yes, you have one premise and you have, and if the premise is forced liquidation, it changes the value compared to, let's say, orderly liquidation, right? Unless you want a second valuation, which, the report itself could be 90% the same, and then perhaps you put a discount because, whatever. It's a force and you only have 60 days because you don't have the proper marketing period. So you could come up, 90% of the report would be the same, the investigations would be the same, but at the end you're saying, well,
I can take different assumptions. I can take different assumptions under which I can arrive at different values. Right?
okay, is there so much difference between the two if you're just, okay, well then if you explain it, that's fine. But it's two different premises with two different valuations.
I mean, that is what our book says here. In fact, the IBC book that you're not aware of says I can do liquidation under 4 different ways, 5 different ways.
Okay.
So, I mean, I can arrive at.
So if you're substituting, so we go back to the point. If you are substituting a premise of value according to the IBC,
Yes.
then you say but then you say, but then you're substituting your premise of value to the IBS premise of value, and then that's fine. You're still compliant with IBS.
I agree.
Sorry, it's true for the basis of value. It's true for the premise of value. It's true for all sorts of things. The tax amortization benefit for some intangible assets.
IBS doesn't bar me from using different assumptions in a value.
This is not an assumption. This is a premise.
It doesn't bar me from.
No, you are in fact required to obey the laws of the jurisdiction. Paragraph 60, page 11. You have to. And by the way, the wording is in fact reinforced in the new exposure draft. It's reinforced. You have to be compliant with the laws. The laws give you a choice between 5. If the IBC gives you a choice between 5 premises of value which they define, then you do what you have to do. I don't have a view on those 5, right? Choose a third one, because that's what's relevant. Say the premise of value is number 3. It's a the basis of value may be liquidation. Premise is according to this, and I'm compliant with IBC and I'm compliant with IBS. We want to give you as much, and I want to emphasize this, we want to give you as much flexibility, because ultimately what's important is not the exact wording of the premise. What's important is all of the investigation, all of the diligence, all of the competency that you showed in coming up with the valuation, in conducting this report, in storing the document, in compiling the research, and storing the documentation, the model, and so on, and to protect you. We are not here to enforce. You have to use this definition. No, we want to protect you. We want to protect the values, and the best way to protect them is to be professional, to be competent, to be ethical, and so on, and to document all of this. This is what's important.
And to give a framework.
Yes, and to give and yes, thank you very much, sir. To give a framework, and in fact that's what you will find in the new exposure draft, is that the flow of the standards is more in line with the typical workflow of the values. So hopefully it's more practical. So
my question is to all the values and to yourself also. When we talk in seminars, we talk of all the perfect situations and say the things that how the things should be, and that's what the purpose of making standards is also. But when we go to the actual field, the things are not that perfect. The things, again, your time given to you for collection of data and other things is also very less and quite pressing. So what is the margin of accuracy is acceptable? That should also be standardized.
The margin of accuracy in the result, or the margin of accuracy in the process?
The process cannot be, process is standard in the result.
Well,
so the 2 values, the 3 values may come in different values.
Yeah.
By their own experience and the premise
Sure.
or other things they use.
Well, it's about, okay, number 1 in the framework is ethics. I think that's the number 1. Would you, ask yourself, would you want your mother to know that you're doing that? Is it ethical?
No, I'm not talking about that. I'm taking ethical situation always.
Yes, it's
But
always
at the same time, you see the conditions are different. So that is why the values are becoming 3 different values for different values, or 4 or different values collected by the 4 different values.
Sure.
Why?
Okay, but why?
The understanding is different, methodology is same.
I would say, okay, well, first of all right, so my career was mostly in public equities for a long time. By definition, so take the point of view of an investor. If you do a DCF of whatever, and you get 10% cost of equity, just bear with me, and you're right, what's the return you're going to get? 10%. The only way you will generate alpha is if in fact your valuation is wrong. In fact, you're hoping that the valuation is wrong, that you get 10%, that you're paying for 10% return, but in fact you're hoping for 15. Right? So there's this inherent paradox in investing. Let's not forget that, at the end of the day, is that you want the valuation to be wrong because that's the only way you make alpha.
That is right. The purpose of making standard is same.
So by definition, there is an imbalance and I would refer you to, for instance, a very good book by Michael Mauboussin, Expectations Investing, very good book. But this is more about investing. Let's come back to the profession of valuation, and I'm getting to this. Why can three people have different? It shows different experiences and different, backgrounds, and you can agree to disagree, or agree to be within a certain framework, and you can agree that ultimately preferences change. I think that honestly, if you have three different valuations, it's because the preferences or the risk appetite is different fundamentally, So that's I think that's where it comes from. Now, let's go back to the standards. Part of this, I was told there was this court case, Videocon. Is it Videocon? Videocon. Right. This is my crash course in Indian case law. I'm now an expert on Videocon. No, it's not true. But one was a valuation of 100. There was a 1 to 4 difference. Right. There are many of these examples. I think that already the valuation standards mitigate the room for misunderstandings and for errors. So if already we were able to suppress the errors and suppress the misunderstandings, it would already be a good start.
No, sir, you have misunderstood. There are three values. All of them have adopted the same methodology, same standards, which has been mentioned in IBSC, but they arrive at different values. And very surprisingly, when actual realization goes, it goes much higher than, most of the cases goes higher than what they have arrived at. So this is also seen. So in those situations, what the marginal acceptability, I should say, mentioned in this?
There is no percentage acceptability. But let's not forget something. Again, it goes back to the premise and so on. If you're valuing the premise for liquidation, and you have a promoter, an entrepreneur, who sees the collection of assets and sees something that no one else sees, well, he will buy the asset. Even if he's doing it on a piece of paper, the back of the envelope, fabled investment, right? He's effectively, implicitly doing it as a fair market, some kind of investment or fair value or some kind of probability weighted, even if it's implicit. He is not doing it according to insolvency rules, liquidation, because he's seeing beyond the liquidation to what could this asset become. It could be repurposed into something. He's seeing something that you, as a valuer, are not seeing, because you're not being asked to see that thing. You are being asked to come up with a valuation for a certain purpose. Whereas a promoter, it's his money, it's his purpose, he does whatever he wants, and he can take a calculated risk about where this collection of assets, or maybe he has his own assets or whatever, some synergy. He is seeing something that you cannot see. So I go back to my original point. He hopes that your valuation is wrong because he's seeing beyond it. Goes to expectations investing,
Nicholas, just one question. I just want to be educated here that in geographies outside India, is it a norm that you do only a one premise valuation?
Okay, well, let me just say, I cannot tell you with confidence that there is a jurisdiction where there are two premises. I cannot tell you I do not know. So I would rather not make something up on the spot.
You were saying that the one single premise valuation is not general norm.
As far as I know, I don't think we can bifurcate I'm not aware of a bifurcation in the same valuation of two premises of value. That's what I'm saying. I can understand why you would have two valuations, and I can understand that 90% of the work would be the same, but there would be two valuations. Just as when you do an impairment testing for every year, you don't start again from you don't reinvent the wheel every year, right? Sir.
Yeah. My question is not related to IBC. I am talking of a company which is a going concern. And in case of a company which is a going concern, we may find that the market method of valuation may not be applicable because the two companies may not be similar in the market. There may be some dissimilarities. Cost approach may also will not apply because it's a going concern. So we will depend on the income approach. Why we depend on the income approach and we look on a long-term valuation of a company which is assumed to be doing well in the future, we assume a lot of positive assumptions which talks about their growth rate and so on and so forth. And we don't anticipate what will be the future competition, what will be the level of competition, what will be the level of changes in technology, which may sooner or later may affect the valuation very badly. Because today you have some technology, and because of the new technology, some other players may come, and their impact may affect the enterprise significantly. Similarly, the competitors will also come. Today, you may be one of the very few manufacturer or a very one of the unique entity, but tomorrow a lot of competitors will also come and affect you very badly. So whatever assumptions you take with regard to your future growth, that may not withstand, and as a result, your valuation which you calculated today may turn out to be very poorly reflective of your competition.
Sure.
Right? We can see the 2-3 examples, like we did the valuation of ATM, we did the valuation of Adani Enterprise, and we did the valuation of LIC in the last 1 year or so. And we see that the sale prices of these companies are trading 50%, below 50%, maybe 60-70% of whatever the valuation was arrived by the valuer. Right?
Yeah.
So can't we have some mechanism in the standard where we can have some inbuilt restrictions on taking something very high level of positive assumptions, whereby we inflate the valuations and we can just contain the valuers from doing
Right.
valuations, unreasonably high valuations.
Sure.
There should be some factor for competition, there should be some negative factor for technology, and
Right.
there may be some factor for uncertainties, etc. Right? And my second part of the question is, like in financial auditing, we have a concept of quality reviewer.
Of what?
Quality
Quality review, yes.
Yeah, we have engagement quality reviewers. In case of listed companies, there is a mandatory requirement to have a quality reviewer in case of every audit engagement, right? So can't we have similar thing in valuation,
Alright, so-
where the work of one valuer is reviewed time and again by different valuer? Can we assess in a better way?
Okay, so let me take those questions, and I'm going to need to go to the airport soon. However much I love engaging with all of you. I'll take the second question first, if you'll allow me. Quality control is something that you will find more specifications of in the new exposure draft. So there is more of that. I would recommend that you have a look, and maybe it gets to that threshold. Maybe I think it's better. There are a few questions, for instance, can a sole practitioner inspect his own work, his or her own work? There are some real issues here. Not everyone works at a big firm, right? So there are some practical and theoretical questions, but please have a look at the pages on quality control. There will, again, I don't think that any kind of quantitative threshold below which will be enforced, because I think that it's more the spirit of the standards and of diligence to go to quality control that is important, rather than some kind of arbitrary cutoff level. To take your first question, you said, and I paraphrase you said, oh, you do the you don't have enough comps, so you do the income method or income approach, and then things go badly to new technology and everything collapses. There are two implicit assertions in what you say. First, you seem to be asserting implicitly that somehow the market approach is the preferred approach or is more reliable than the income approach. This is it. You say it implicitly. For me, I mean.
But Nicholas, I mean, from the level one input perspective, market transaction is more reliable, right?
No, they're all. This says that it is part of your job as a valuer to find the best approach and method, whatever the asset. If you don't have the comps to do that, then yeah, take whatever's best. Could even be cost in some extreme examples for startups. Cost may be the only way to go if you really have nothing else to go on. So the three approaches can be used in business valuation depending on the circumstances. So I would just say that. But the other thing that you're saying is things could collapse. The technology could change, the market shares could, yeah. But they could also be much better. And we go back to the original point, which is that in this liquidation example we were talking about, the promoter sees what you don't see. In fact, that's what I was saying in my original point, that has nothing to do with the professional valuation, but rather is something that the investors look at. They want to be wrong. They are taking a calculated, probabilistic risk in buying these assets, in buying this share. Right? Or in shorting the shares, by the way. It's a probabilistic. And that's why the mentality of the investor with whom I had purchased most of my career is slightly different to the mentality of the valuer, because the valuer is operating under certain constraints. He's not operating like a hedge fund manager. His view is maybe, and here we're straying away from this, right? So, but his view is he is giving a data point to the fund manager that is buying the asset for within his own parameters of objectives and constraints. If he's buying, it's not because he's hoping for 10%, because that's your whack. He's hoping for more than 10%. He's hoping that you're wrong. He's hoping that the valuer is wrong, in fact. Which is the fundamental paradox here of the valuation profession. We're all not anymore, but we are producing values where the guy who's actually accepting bankruptcy courts and where the guy is hoping that you're wrong. Yeah. It's a fantastic paradox.
Yeah.
Because you want to talk about service organization.
Yes.
What is that?
Sorry.
Actually, I have one supplementary question.
Yes.
My,
I'm going to take your question. I'm going to answer yours, and then I'm going to go to the airport.
Yeah. My suggestion was that might probably inbuilt a discount factor to the valuer, that whether he has inbuilt any discount for the competition, whether he has inbuilt any discount for the technology.
All I can say is
That is a zero. Right?
it's either
Zero.
why
Right.
it's either in the cash flow or it's in the discount rate. But you can't put the discount and you can't put it in the cash flow and the discount rate. Pick your poison. And then you go into a whole discussion. Is it the most unlikely outcome? Is your projection, is your cash flow, is it the most likely single modal outcome, or is it a kind of a composite probability weighted outcome? This is a real question. This is actually a real question that features in court cases in the US. When you do your DCF, is it the mode or is it some kind of average? These are legitimate questions. Yes, service organization. There are more and more professionals helping valuers, experts, technical experts. They need to be, we have to include them in the framework. So that because you, as valuers, are deriving values based on the expertise of these professionals in an area which is not your area of expertise, and therefore we needed to include that. So we made it much more clear, and to be more disclosures, so that everyone knows what's what. And I think that this was more implicit previously. I also think that there's just been a volume effect, just more experts about more fields for more reasons in more jurisdictions. So I think this is a very, very good move that reflects, again, the changes in the valuation profession that we are all witnessing. One more, and then I'm out of here.
Last question, please.
Last question.
I was just explaining the point which raised regarding the varied premises in the regulation, which basically Indian law, as you have clarified that any premises can be based on the local decision that is compliance of the but as far as the regulation concerns, that is given both premises as he specific that he come out with the four valuations. So it's very difficult for the litigator or the court to accept four valuations then proceed for that. So that is in general. So there must be some clarifications or changing the regulation or some four values for that, because if the premises changing, then the values will change. That's what I want to argue also. Help us in getting this clear.
Your point is well taken, but I don't have a view on premises and so I just do not have a view. Is it a short question?
Short. Okay. Because he has a flight to catch back to Singapore.
Yeah, I need to go. All right. Short question.
I won't take much time, but I just want
Is the car outside? Yeah. Okay.
A lot of things have been said about the valuation, and we all know that valuation is something which forces you to see future.
Yes.
And that on the basis of the historical data. And we do not know the quality of the historical data. I think Manish said that we do not know who is providing that data and what kind of data is that person is providing. So can we suggest some tools within the standards that could be adopted by the valuer who can use those tools to make it better for customer, and especially when the machine learning and all AI instruments are coming in. So can we integrate those in some,
It's a matter. Yeah, it's a matter of.
in appendix we say that these are the artificial intelligence tools which the valuer may use or something like that.
So there are new tools, but they will not replace judgment. We had a perspective paper on AVMs. You can do all that, but at the end of the day, it needs to rely on human input. If it's not human input, it is not a valuation. It's as simple as that. Now, there are legitimate qualms about the quality of past data. Again, your judgment, is the data good enough to reach a conclusion of value or not? If the answer is no, then you have to decline the engagement. It's as simple as that. If you think that you have enough to go by, then come up with the valuation. You can produce a valuation. But you are by definition acting under uncertain information. There's no way around that. Anyway, thank you very much for your time. I apologize, I need to go. These were fantastic questions. Thank you to our remote audience. Thank you for everyone in the audience. Thank you, Dr. Gupta, and thank you everyone. It was a pleasure. Thank you.
I would like to thank each one of you for participating in this interactive session. My special thanks to Mala sir for sparing time from his busy schedule. Thank you, sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I'm going to run. Moment. One more. No, the meeting will not start.
much for joining us. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much for everyone. Thank
so
you for your
much
patience.
joining us. Thank you. Yeah, that is let's have a group photograph outside. Group photograph outside. सब लोग आ जाइए ग्रुप फोटोग्राफ कर लेते हैं।